And there's a tweet here that talks about fatherlessness, which is another cop-out for explaining the crime rate.
Yeah, it says when fatherlessness happens via a death of the father, child outcomes are pretty similar to two-parent families. This indicates the issue is not fatherlessness.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah. So divorce or non-marital birth and then death. So they kind of carved out those things in this study. And it makes sense to me because here's a tweet. It said Europe had 2 interwar periods with lots of dead fathers. It did not develop black crime rates.
Former LA mayoral candidate and real estate developer.
Let's try that.
All right. And we're back.
Oh, I can't hear that at all.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay. All right. I'm Aaron Matte, sitting in for Jimmy Dore. We're talking to James Galbraith, economist and professor at the University of Texas, Austin, about Liberation Day and Trump's tariffs and the market turmoil that has resulted. James Galbraith is the author of many books, including his latest, Entropy Economics, The Living Basis of Value and Production. And Professor Galbraith, I wanted to get your response to some new reporting from the Washington Post on how these tariffs were calculated by the Trump team. This comes from the Washington Post's Jeff Stein. President Trump personally selected the now widely mocked formula for determining country-specific tariffs from a menu of options, multiple sources say. Numerous Trump aides had for weeks been at work crafting country-specific tariffs that took into account a broad range of tariff and non-tariff barriers. Several sources said more sophisticated approaches had been developed. I can't confirm precisely who authored the one Trump picked, but it bears striking similarities to methods previously backed publicly by Peter Navarro, the ultra-trade hawk. And here are some of the details from the inside story on President Trump's whirlwind decision to blow up global trade. Not long after Trump's inauguration, the administration's economic staff went to work on a daunting task, determining tariff rates for dozens of countries to fulfill the president's campaign pledge of imposing reciprocal trade barriers. After weeks of work, aides from several government agencies produced a menu of options meant to account for a wide range of trading practices. Instead, Trump personally selected a formula that was based on 2 simple variables: the trade deficit with each country and the total value of its U.S. exports. So, Professor Galbraith, what do you make of this approach by Trump, shunning the formulas that were given to him by his aides and instead going?
Well, it's quite astonishing.
Yeah,
First of all, it's nothing like a reciprocal tariff arrangement. It is not connected to the tariff rates that other countries are charging us. The trade deficit that we have with any particular country is an entirely different matter. And the apparent basis of this is the idea that we should be engaged in balanced trade with every country out there. And the world hasn't worked that way, and I don't think it's ever worked that way, but it certainly does not working that way in recent times. And the tariffs are very unlikely to achieve that result, but I don't understand why you would want to. You look at particular cases, well, you find that with certain very poor countries like Madagascar or Lesotho, you have countries which export vanilla or diamonds or something like that to the United States, and don't import very much from the United States because we don't produce anything they can afford to buy. And why would you hit their exports with a big tariff? It's a very strange strategy. But that's a really sidelight. The major thing here is the effect on our major trading partners, and I think here there are 2 separate broad cases. One is with Mexico and Canada. The tariffs are relatively light, and the idea there, I think, is to basically make it survivable for those companies which have very, very deeply integrated supply chains with those countries. And the other part is with China and with the extensions of the Chinese trading bloc in East Asia, Vietnam, Myanmar, Thailand, where companies have been leaving China in order to establish export platforms for the United States, and all of that's coming under very heavy tariffs, against which the Chinese are retaliating. And so, what I think you're going to see there is just deepening integration of the Eurasian economic sphere. Japan, South Korea, and China have already gotten together in a very remarkable meeting to coordinate their response. And I think you're seeing it to the extent that there's a strategy behind this rather strange formula. It will consolidate the Asian economies as a internal trading bloc and reduce the cross trans-Pacific trade by substantial amounts in favor of North American trade.
So here's an example of how the Trump administration made its tariff calculations. This comes from James Surowiecki on Twitter. Just figured out where these fake tariff rates come from. They didn't actually calculate tariff rates plus non-tariff barriers as they say they did. Instead, for every country, they just took our trade deficit with that country and divided it by the country's exports to us. So we have, for example, a $17.9 billion trade deficit with Indonesia. Indonesia's exports to us are $28 billion. So 17.9 out of 28 billion equals 64%, which Trump claims is the tariff rate Indonesia charges us. What extraordinary nonsense this is. I mean, first of all, do you agree, James Galbraith, that this is nonsense? And, explain
It's
more.
had nothing to do with the tariff rates that
Yeah.
Indonesia charges or the Vietnam charges or the China charges. It's not connected to the tariff rates at all, which I say it's not the tariff that's being imposed is not a reciprocal tariff in any normal meaning of that word. So it's a confected number, which is supposed to represent trade barriers generally, but it doesn't. It represents the pattern of trade, which has a lot to do with the income levels of different countries and what the composition of what they export and what they import. The United States exports very high value products to the extent that we still have them, and those tend to go to high income countries to a larger extent. So there's only a certain number of aircraft and a certain number of, let's say, oil field systems and a certain number of medical imaging devices and so forth that low income countries can absorb. So this is there's if there's an underlying idea that we should have balanced trade with everybody, it's obviously something of a pipe dream. But again, I don't think that's. I mean, I think you look at the results and then you say, well, this is really going to hit the suppliers that are based in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and it's going to. Because of the easier deal that Canada and Mexico got, it will hit them less, and maybe there will be trade substitution, which will strengthen their trade with the United States. Although even they will experience substantially higher tariffs than they've had before.
And what do you think this means for the goods that these countries produce that provide cheap products for American consumers? Like, is this era of cheap goods, cheap merchandise, is it over?
Yes, I think we're going to see very substantial increases in all kinds of consumer goods. Anything that is coming from Asia, that supply chain has just been hit with a very big tax, and that will show up basically as a kind of sales tax on American consumers. Lots of food products will be subject to very substantial cost and price increases. They're coming from. I was just reading about seafood. 85% of that's imported, and a lot of it is imported from Asia. Now you're going to see that's a product with a very short shelf life, and you're going to see price increases there quite substantially. So the American consumer has been living for a long time on the strength of the dollar and on the free trade system and the willingness of other countries to ship us goods at low prices. And the Trump administration come in and put an end to that. And they certainly have a tool that will make that happen. And the first effect will be on living standards. A second effect will be on the financial system, I think, because the companies that are caught up in supply chain disruptions are going to have trouble meeting all of their commitments. So we'll see that. I think that's why what you're seeing in banking stocks. There may be an effect on the dollar as well, which would contribute to further cost increases. Down the road, what they're hoping for is that there will be investment and increase in import substitution, we call it, increase in jobs in the United States. And that's a very problematic proposition. And my view is it would take a lot to reverse the damage to the industrial base of the United States over the last 40 or 50 years. You would need a lot more personnel who are capable of doing that. You need a lot of investment in infrastructure. You need regulatory structures that will press corporations to make those investments. And they're just relying on the market for that. And that's a good luck. You're not going to get it. What you're going to get is the empowerment of a small subset of American companies that will take advantage of the higher prices that they can charge. And the American consumer will take it, will absorb the blow.
We're talking to James Galbraith. He is an economist and professor at the University of Texas, Austin. His latest book is Entropy Economics, the Living Basis of Value and Production. And I want to get your response to how the Trump administration is trying to reassure people about the panic that's ensued over the decline in the stock market as a result of Trump's imposing of tariffs on countries around the world. This is Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, on CNN.
Let Donald Trump run the global economy. He knows what he's doing. He's been talking about it for 35 years. You got to trust Donald Trump in the White House. That's why they put him there. Let him fix it.
I understand.
It's broken. Let him fix it. Our $36 trillion deficit, right, is going to ruin our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives. Let Donald Trump fix the American economy.
Just to follow up with you.
So he's saying there, James Galbraith, let Donald Trump not just run the American economy, but the global economy. And he's warning about our deficit, our $36 trillion deficit. If we don't take action, if we don't impose these tariffs, it's going to ruin all of us. First of all, do you trust Donald Trump to run the global economy as Howard Lutnick does?
Well, I think this is confusing economics with witchcraft to say if there's any individual, and I know this is an American political habit. I mean, it was a question of this. The same story was being said about Joe Biden and Bidenomics, and it doesn't cut any mustard for someone who studies the economy in a serious way. So without any disparaging President Trump, the economy functions according to certain principles. It's not something which is guided around by the master spirit in the White House. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, which part of the world is better equipped to deal with the shock to trade? The United States, where we can say quite correctly that a large part of the industrial structure has been hollowed out by the actions of American corporations, by the American financial sector over the course of a long period of time. And we don't have the engineering infrastructure. We don't have the physical infrastructure. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the resources specifically. We don't have the foundries that we would need to quickly upgrade our industrial production. We're not back in the 1930s or the early 1940s when we had those capacities. On the other side, you can go and look at what's going on in Asia, what's been going on in China, where they have been deepening their technical capacity, deepening their expertise, improving their technology, improving their access to world markets, lowering their costs, improving the quality of what they produce. And they're quite prepared, as they showed yesterday when they hit back with an equal 34% tariff on American goods. They're quite prepared to take up that challenge. And they're 4 times larger than we are in terms of population, and they have a much larger trading sector than we do, much more broadly based. So I think that we'll find that if we're playing a game here of competition between 2 large powers, that we don't have the United States doesn't have the stronger hand. And that's got really nothing to do with whether Donald Trump is motivated in the right way or is providing leadership or needs trust.
Here is Janine Pirro of Fox News saying that, look, she's not worried about her 401k right now because she trusts in Trump.
And you know what? I don't really care about my 401k today. You know what? Not that I can afford it. Not that it isn't important. Not that I'm not at a point in my life when I should be worried about my 401k, because I am. But this is what I believe. I believe in this man. And I believe that what we're seeing now with his bringing in $1 trillion in business and manufacturing and companies moving back to the United States and seeing what we saw during COVID when we had all those supply.
So she trusts in Trump and is not worried about her 401k, but not everyone makes a few $1 million like she does at Fox News, and people are understandably worried about it. But let me ask you, James Galbraith, these tariffs in tandem with the deregulation that we've seen going on with Trump, he cut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He's talking about more tax cuts, which critics say is skewed towards the ultra wealthy. Obviously, he's not a very big fan of regulations to begin with. These things in tandem, DOGE cutting public sector jobs, cutting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, plus these tariffs. I mean, what do you see here as the overall impact of the tariffs plus the deregulation?
Well, I think there's a real series of contradictions here. First of all, the tariffs are a huge tax increase, and they're a tax increase on American consumption first and foremost. Will they be offset by other tax cuts? I think the answer to that is that's coming down the pipe, and pipeline, and we'll see that. And the distributional effect of those tax cuts will be very different from that of the tax increases. So we're going to see a heavier burden on ordinary working Americans and a lighter burden on on the wealthy and on American business. And how that pans out in terms of whether businesses engage in investment, that's yet a further question. And I'm skeptical about. I think in order to get businesses to see this as a long-term problem that requires them to really expand their capacity and improve their game, up their game in terms of the competitiveness of what they do, they have to see this as something which is sustainable over a long period of time. And I first of all suspect that they're going to be quite skeptical about that. And businesses generally don't like to take that kind of risk in a very uncertain environment. They were willing to do it in the early 1940s in order to meet the needs of the country to mobilize for the Second World War, and especially because the government told them they had to. But here we have a government which says, well, we're just going to take the regulations off. We're not going to use our power to have a concerted sort of whole of government, whole country effort to achieve whatever the goal is. And that suggests to me that that a fair fraction of businesses will simply say, gee, thanks very much for giving us a chance to charge higher prices. And they'll leave it at that and drag their feet on the expansion of capacity. I mean, it's not a new problem. I think the same thing happened with Biden's subsidies for various kinds of investment. They didn't go forward as fast as the administration would have liked. And in an uncertain environment where we don't know what the Fed is going to do with interest rates and cost of capital, that's not a surprise.
Well, you mentioned that we've endured times of extreme economic shock and sacrifice during times of war, and this is the message now we're hearing a lot on Fox News. That we're at war now, so this is another moment. So here, for example, is Harris Faulkner of Fox News.
And those 401k people who are depending, those retirees, all of that. Just talking plain speak with them. look, when this nation used to go to war, people in this country would support the war effort with their materials at home and making things for weaponry and all of that. We got to do 100% buy-in over this bumpy period. Just communicate.
Kaylee.
So that's the message, that essentially we've done this before, times of war, so why not now? James Galbraith, your response to that?
Well, you know, I'll put it this way. In 1941, 42, my father was a special assistant to the director of the National Defense Advisory Commission, and then he was a deputy director of the Office of Price Administration. He was deeply involved in what was a massive mobilization effort to go to war. And it takes an effective and competent government to do that. If you take the government you have and you tear it apart, and you let the pieces fall to the ground, exactly how is it going to be an effective tool to guide the country on a strategy of economic renovation? The answer is it's not. What you're going to be doing is asking the business community to deal with this problem. And a good part of the business community is going to be caught up with trying to deal with their supply chain issues, which is going to be tough enough, and some of them are not going to make it, frankly. And the part which has maybe have an easier time on supply chain is going to be sitting there saying, how can I make the most money out of the current situation? And that's not necessarily by expanding capacity in the way in which the administration and the country would like them to do. So without a coordinated whole country effort run by people who know what they're doing and who have the kind of engineering expertise and management expertise to make it happen, I don't see it. I see an effort which is essentially placing faith not in Donald Trump. And again, I don't want to start on the premise that he's off on some malicious project here, but the people who have to execute are going to be the business leaders, and exactly what is going to make them take risks they don't want to make, go out on limbs that they don't want to go out on, assume policies that are not going to change when they know very well they could change over the course of a week or 2 weeks or a month or 6 months, and the projects that they need to execute are 3 and 5 and 10-year projects. What's going to make them do this? I don't see it happening. One of the functions of regulation, by the way, is to impose modernization standards on business and to keep them at the forefront of the competitive game. And if you take down the regulations, then the bottom feeders of the industrial system and of the economic system say that's just fine. We'll continue to produce second-rate goods at excessively high prices, and then give them a protected market in which they can do that. It just deteriorates the living standard of the country. It isn't something which is going to get you back on the forefront. Where if you think you're going to be in a war, an economic war or trade war, I hope not a shooting war, with China, then don't expect to prevail in it.
We're talking about the impact of Trump imposing global tariffs with James Galbraith. He is an economist and professor at the University of Texas, Austin, author of many books, including his latest, Entropy Economics, The Living Basis of Value and Production. Now, while there are many Wall Street analysts and economists that have been critical of Trump's tariffs, he has gotten support from some workers, and they were among the crowd at the White House for Trump's so-called Liberation Day announcement. A group of auto workers were there at the White House, and one of them spoke alongside Trump.
100%. So, Mr. President, we can't thank you enough. And in 6 months or a year, we're going to begin to see the benefits. I can't wait to see what's happening 3 or 4 years down the road. Thank you, Mr. President.
So that's a clip from the White House announcement where Trump enacted the executive orders imposing global tariffs. And you see there a contingent of auto workers saying that, yes, there might be some short-term pain right now, but within 6 to 12 months, this is really going to help us. So, James Galbraith, can you respond to that? This is not just...
there's no doubt they're speaking to their interest. I can't fault them for being happy with getting a protective barrier against a body of imports that have been undercutting them for a long period of time, for sure. No question about that. But the question is, for the larger question I would ask is, if we're going to see a significant decline in imported automobiles, are we going to see a corresponding increase in high-quality American automobile production? That is, again, an open question. That's the question I would focus on. I don't know that I think we will see some. I think also I should have added here that the position of the European producers is even weaker, and they are almost surely going to accelerate the movement of European factories to the United States. So we'll see some of that for sure. And I don't, I'm not saying this isn't going to work in the interests of some segments of the economy.
And what do you make of the critique that basically whatever Trump might be doing wrong here, at least he's doing something, whereas Democrats have talked about, or some Democrats like Bernie's an independent, but Bernie is an independent on the Democratic side, and Barack Obama, they've criticized these so-called free trade deals, but they've done nothing about them, including Obama when he was in office. I mean, here, for example, is David Sirota pointing out that some workers are applauding Trump's tariffs. Neither Democrats nor elite media seem interested in exploring the other side of the tariff debate. And he quotes Sean Fain, the head of UAW, saying, "We applaud the Trump administration for stepping up to end the free trade disaster that has devastated working class communities." And here's Bernie Sanders back in 2008. And listen to what he said about the impact of these so-called free trade deals on the working class.
Further, what they have said is that we need to not worry about manufacturing in America, because what we should establish is a policy of unfettered free trade. We don't need tariffs. What we need is to allow corporate America the freedom to throw American workers out on the street. People who are making 15, 20, 25 bucks an hour, healthcare, pensions, throw them out on the street, because somehow, Madam President, we are going to create wealth in America and good paying jobs in America as we shut down plants. We move to China, corporations there pay workers 20, 30 cents an hour, and we bring the product back into this country. And anyone who goes shopping in a mall knows how difficult it is today to find the product made in America. But that is the philosophy. And I have to say, in that regard, the champion, and he is honest on this one. Senator McCain has been criticized recently for not being the most honest candidate we have seen in terms of his ads and so forth. He has been honest on this one. He is the lead advocate of unfettered free trade. And
here's Barack Obama the same year, 2008.
We can't keep passing unfair trade deals like NAFTA that put special interests over workers' interests. And it's because of this long-standing commitment to working families that I will not sign any trade agreement as president that does not have protections for our environment and protections for American workers.
NAFTA needs to be amended. And I've already said that I would contact the President of Mexico and the Prime Minister of Canada to make sure that the labor and environmental agreements are actually enforceable in the same way that patent protections and other things that are important to corporate America are enforceable.
So what would you say, James Galbraith, that someone who might look at this and say, well, Democrats have been talking a big game for a long time, but have done very little about it. Here's Trump finally coming along and doing what progressive voices have been promising to do for a very, very long time and wanting to do for a very long time.
No, that's entirely true. They again, I was working for the Congress at the start of this, which predates NAFTA by well over a decade, in the late 70s and early 80s with the so-called Reagan Revolution and Paul Volcker's shock to the dollar, which devastated the American industrial base in the recession of 1981 and 82. The point I would make is we're a long way from that. It is not simply It's not simply a question of putting up a trade barrier and then saying it's all going to get better very quickly. You can set the conditions where it might start to get better, but it's very likely that the same American corporations who rapaciously outsourced and deindustrialized are going to look for the easiest way to make a few dollars off of the tariffs without producing the great expansion of industrial capacity, which it has been lost and which may be at least very slow to return, if it's possible to bring it back at all, remembering that to do this successfully, you probably need larger markets than just the United States. You need to be competitive in the world. And out there in the world, the situation has changed dramatically. In the 1980s, China was not an industrial power with any significant presence in the world, and it's now the world's largest industrial economy with high, very cost-effective products and very great market access around the world. So we are re-entering, if we are truly re-entering the race at this point, we have two great disadvantages. One is that we have a serious competitor on a scale that we didn't have before. And the other is that we are trying to do this with one tool, which is to say the tariffs, and not with any of the other tools that would be required to map out a plan for effective reindustrialization. So that makes me not very optimistic. If you think you're just going to set up a tariff wall and then the market will fix everything else, then you're basically handing the initiative to, let's say, people who are not going to execute. And that's the point I would make. So I'm not disagreeing with the position that Bernie Sanders just described. I'm not disagreeing with the happiness of the auto workers. So there obviously are still significant interest in workers' interest in this country that will benefit from the tariffs. That's clear enough. But that's only a very small part of what this project is supposedly setting out to achieve.
And just very briefly, as we wrap, if you were advising President Trump, what other tools would you be advising him to use to achieve the goals that he says he wants, which is to rescue American jobs.
I think
raise
you
standards
need
of
an
living.
effectively functioning federal government. An effectively functioning federal government with the expertise to give you advice over a wide range of industrial and other areas, and to understand what you are doing to the financial sector and to be prepared to cope with that. So far as I can tell, judging from, among other things, the clips you've just been playing, that's precisely what it doesn't have. And they set out, in a sense, to further degrade the government, which was already deeply degraded from the time of Bill Clinton, but especially the time of George W. Bush onward, even earlier. And so the capacity of the federal government to be a partner and an effective force for a major economic strategy is not there as it was in the 1930s and the 1940s, when Roosevelt came in with the New Deal and then built up the country in such a way that it could provide the armaments necessary for basically all the combatants on the Allied side to prosecute the Second World War. You can imagine, if you go back and look at that history, the government was deeply involved at every level of the transformation that was required. It didn't just call on the private sector to go do it. And that's the concern I have. I don't think we have that capacity anymore. I don't think we even have a consciousness of the need for that capacity.
James Galbraith, author, professor of economics at the University of Texas, Austin. His latest book is Entropy Economics, The Living Basis of Value and Production. James Galbraith, thank you so much for joining us today on the Jimmy Dore Show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure talking to you.
All right, we're going to go over to Rumble now. So we're going to move over to Rumble. So find us there, Jimmy Dore on Rumble. We'll see you there very shortly.
Hey, free speech is under attack, but Rumble refuses to back down. We've always believed in empowering voices, no matter how unpopular. And now we're taking that fight to the next level. When major advertisers conspired to pull their dollars, even brands like Dunkin' Donuts turned their backs, claiming Rumble had a right-wing culture. But we're not here to fit a mold. We're here to defend free expression. To strengthen this mission, we're excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits for viewers and creators. You'll find exclusive content from creators like Russell Brand, Dr. Disrespect, Timcast, and the Mug Club with Crowder. It's more than just a subscription. It's a stand for free speech. Your voice matters. Join Rumble Premium. For a limited time, you can get $10 off an annual plan using promo DORE10. Visit Rumble today. Go visit rumble.com/premium/DORE10 and claim your discount today. Together, we can turn the tide, whether you join Rumble Premium or simply keep watching. Your support helps keep free speech alive.